Hello and welcome to another episode of Statford Bridge. Chelsea by the numbers. A successful win. Chelsea win 4-2 versus Gent in the Conference League midweek at home. This is one of the two most difficult games Chelsea will have in the league phase of the Conference League, either the Gent match or Panathinaikos away, which I think might be a little bit more difficult than this, before kind of a little bit of an easier back half of their league stage. But Chelsea handled their business. It was a fairly calm game. There was a little bit of craziness in terms of the goals, but it was a lot of ball go in. But other than that, Chelsea were pretty good. They scored some goals. I thought they did some interesting things. We saw a fully rotated 11 again. Philip Jorgensen in goal. Renato Vega left back, Betty Chile, Tosin Adarabioyo, Disasi at right back, Dewsbury Hall and João Felix as the 8s with Cassidy as the 6, Mudryk and Neto as the wingers, and Nkunku as the 9. I think this was more or less the 11 that pretty much everyone talked about for this match. And Gent set up in a 3-4-3 that kind of became a 5-4-1 or a 5-2-3 defensively. Funnily, they had Eidur Gudjonsson's son Andre up front, which I thought was really funny. He had like a decent attempt in the first half, and he's assisted their goal off of second phase of set piece. And I mean, it's going to be very hard to talk about a lot of these Conference League games from a stats perspective because Chelsea are at such a talent advantage that like all the games are going to be 1.5 plus XG wins. I hope, anyways. If they're not, something's gone wrong. And Chelsea are probably the beneficiary of some quite hot finishing and some truly dreadful goalkeeping. Like, if I'm being honest, if we look at Chelsea's 2.5 XG turns into 1 XG on target and somehow score 4 goals. Like, he was porous at best. But I thought Chelsea were fine. Maybe a little bit better than fine. I thought Mykhailo Mudryk had a quite good game. He was very active taking on players 1v1, which he when Mudryk is direct and he's dribbling at people to create dangerous moments, he is such a different player. Like, opt to have him as one of 5 successful dribbles, which I think is ridiculous because he dribbles into the box like 5 times. But he dribbles into the box. He gets 11 box touches, which is just insane for a winger. So, and most of that is him getting into the box himself. It's not a lot of him like receiving it in the box. And he sets up Renato Vega's goal, which I thought was quite fun. But he got to the end line. He got to some good spots. He doesn't create a whole ton out of it. Gent were defending very deep. 5-4-1, very deep block. I thought their center backs all had quite good games. But I thought Mudryk was actually quite good today. And the other player that I'd want to flag is Cesare Cassidy, who, again, had a somewhat surprisingly fine game as a defensive midfielder. Again, it's a game where Chelsea have some 70% of the ball, right? Yeah, Opta has it logged as 70% of the ball. So it's a lot of just like counter-pressing tactical fouling. But I thought he did an okay job, like enough to the point the Londoners Blue podcast did an episode kind of showing all the people who are up for suspension, and like we saw that when Enzo Fernandez was out against Bournemouth due to illness, that Renato Vega went into midfield, and it was supposed to be Dewsbury Hall, but then Dewsbury Hall was sick as well, and I went to Renato Vega, to the point that now I'm like, well, if Cassidy is out, are they going to go Vega or are they going to go Cassidy? Sorry, if Caicedo is out, are they going to go Cassidy or are they going to go Renato Vega? And I'm pleasantly surprised by that because I didn't think this was really the role he would ever thrive in, and I think he's been okay. Now, the other thing that I think I've really enjoyed is, before we get into the tactical stuff and what Chelsea did in this game and what takeaways there are, which there are not many, is that we saw 11 changes again from the Brighton match. And what I think Enzo Maresca has done very well so far, other than he didn't use very many subs today, which I didn't like, especially when you're up 3-4-1, like, make the subs, man, is the first team has played the league games, and the second team, who have played the Conference League games, are the subs for the league games. And when the second team plays the Cup games, the subs are not the first team players. The subs are kids. It's Mark Guiu, it's Tyreek George. If we look at the Servette game, before that, okay, yes, Cole Palmer comes on in the Servette game, but we also see Josh Achimpong. We also see Tyreek George make an appearance. We also see, we see reasonable subs in those games. And so that has been pleasant so far. We saw it in the Cup against Barrow as well. The second team plays and then the kids come on, which I thought was quite nice. So I've liked that. And I think that's going to be a good thing for Chelsea, because when we're talking about going through the run of a season, right? When we're talking about going through a league campaign of 38 matches and 6 Conference League plus the 2 you've already played, plus another 8 from the knockout rounds, plus another 8 Cup games, and you're talking about a 60-game season, like, everyone from your squad is going to be needed. And so having Conference League games to get people up to speed, such that if Nkunku has to start a league game, or Neto has to start a league game, or one of the center backs has to start a league game, like, they're not coming out of the cold having not played a match for 2 months. They're coming back in having played 3 days ago. So they're, if not sharp, they're not blunt, at least. And I think that matters. But from an analytics perspective, whatever, Chelsea put 2.5 to 2.3 to 1. The big chance kind of comes at the end for them. That's a third of their XG. Half of it comes from 2 chances, and like 1 is a truly horrific breakdown on a defensive set piece. But I think like it was a mostly fine performance from Chelsea. Lots of shots, good field tilt, lots of box touches. It was a very comfortable game, I thought, against a decent team, like no slouches. So that was quite nice. Before we get into the tactical stuff, pod listeners, we're going to take a break here. And if you're watching on YouTube, we'll go straight through. So let's go into the tactical stuff. Chelsea lined up in what Opta are calling a 4-2-3-1. I would just call it a 4-3-3 because it was really like this most of the time, with Cassidy as a 6, Felix as an 8, and Dewsbury Hall as an 8. But actually what happened was we saw the 3-4-3 diamond that we've seen a lot this season, right? So Chelsea, when they've built this year, have had 3 main shapes. We've seen when they build from the goalkeeper that it's a 4-2. So Cassidy and Dewsbury Hall. And you use the goalkeeper as a third center back, and you build, here's 3-2, but really it's 4-2. And you end up with your 10 and your 9 as this. Today they pressed 1, then 2. So their 9 would become a 10 and manage the 2 6s, and the wingers would step to lock one way. This is how they would press today. And this is how Chelsea would build, is they'd sit with 2. They would play to the goalkeeper, they'd wait for the press to come, and then they'd try and go into midfield and bounce out. And they were pretty fine. Their build success rate was like 1,000,000,000% today. And so we've seen this. This has been one way Chelsea have built, right? Is they go 4, 2-2, they pin with the 10 and the 9 on both sides, and they keep their wingers super high, super wide, and this is how they create 4 inside. The other thing we've seen is not from goal kicks, but when Chelsea are building higher, right? So where Gent dropped into a 5-4-1, and it was very 5-4-1, 5-2-3 the whole time today, is that you would have Chelsea make the back 3 with Disasi, Tosin, and Badiashile, right? That would be their back 3. Vega would end up in midfield. And instead of it being a 3-2 where Vega ends up next to Cassidy, it was the 3 diamond 3, where you'd have Cassidy as the 6, you'd have Dewsbury, Hall, and Vega as 8s, not super high but not low either. And then Felix is kind of free to make runs into the channel depending where it is. I don't think he had a very good game today, but I thought he did a very good job of making repeated runs into the channel to open space for other people. We don't have the Opta data yet from this, but I'd be curious to see. Like, he has 2 shots for himself, and he creates a quarter of an expected goal for 0.6 xG. Like, that's pretty fine, I think. 7 box touches is always nice. Like, I thought he had an okay game. He's just a little bit selfish and a little wasteful, but he did a good job of making runs in depth from this spot. And I would be curious to see how Enzo Maresca decides when we're going to build 3 diamond 3, so wingers super high and wide pinning, 9 pinning, and then 10 free to roam, versus when it's like this and it's 6, 10. I would be so curious to know how he makes that decision, because in my head, when you think about playing a team who's going to defend 5-4-1 or with a 6, right? Because this was like a 6, 2 wingers and a 9. When you build with a single 6 and 2 8s and the 10 in between, it's almost impossible for the back 3 to play into the 10 and the 9, because the 10 and the 9 are almost on top of each other. And I realize for pod listeners, this is going to be very difficult to follow, but like, I'll do my best to be descriptive with my language, but it's easier when you can see the tactics board. But when you build in a diamond 3, your 9 and your 10 can often end up on top of each other, and it's very difficult to play the 10 directly. Like, we saw this a lot with Chelsea. We saw this a lot with Chelsea trying to kind of jam balls into Felix and it not really on the ground and it not really coming. What they had a lot more success with, what they had a lot more success with was when they would play into midfield and the midfield would be really compressed. And Vega, Cassidy, Dewsbury Hall, and Kunku Felix would play like little tight combos to get into one of the front players for connections. And that was where those 2 guys really came alive to create stuff. They didn't get anything super amazing. There were a couple nice moments that the defenders made some quite good plays on. But to me, the more obvious one is when you set up with a 6. So let's say it's Vega and Cassidy, and you end up with Felix, Dewsbury Hall, and Nkunku as like a middle 3. Well, now you have all these players, the 2 6s, have really difficult decisions to make about who do they take away. So, like, let's say the winger closes Badiashile from the outside. Okay, well, now he can play into Vega. So, and now if you want to take Vega away with the 9, well, then you have the winger has to come to Cassidy on the weak side, and you can play into Tosin. And now when you play to Tosin, if you skew these players a little bit, well, what happens? If you end up like this, Tosin skips and goes to Felix for a 2v1, right? So if you end up, the 2 screeners have 3 players to screen, basically, is the idea. And it's very, very difficult. Whereas if they're like this is fine. Who's dangerous here? Like, you can end up like this, and now Vega is not available to play. Even if he sits here, you can go here, and this is still not dangerous, right? So it's just very odd to me that I would love to know, and God knows a journalist is not going to ask him this, but I would love to know why he is making the decisions he makes in terms of when it's a 6 and when it's a diamond. And if any journalists listen, feel free to ask him that question, and please publish the answer, because I would love to know. Bring a tactics board to the press conference. I bet you would love it. But that was kind of the tactical side of things. There, other than this, the only interesting thing is that Chelsea ran a very creative gamut of attacking set pieces. They created 2 very good chances out of it, scored neither, which is frustrating. But we saw a lot of relocation stuff, which I talked about on stream this week, where the group would start as a bunch, and then they would all go to the back post to start their runs forward, which is a very common tactic against zonal markers. But it's very clear that Bernardo Cueva is like building. So we've seen start with a bunch and then relocate into the box, which is the thing for man markers, and then we've seen relocate to the back post to attack zonal runners, or attack zonals with runners. But another really creative wrinkle, and hopefully we start seeing some of those go in. That was quite interesting, but other than that, there wasn't really a ton to take away from this game. I was a little bit disappointed to not see Kiana Dyer, but that is what it is. The last kind of topic to talk about is the Nottingham Forest game, which is coming up on the weekend. Forest so far have profiled like a very decent Premier League team. If we look at the kind of league overview on FBref, by expected goal difference, like Forest are a top 7 team, and they have played like not a super hard schedule, but not an easy schedule either. Like Liverpool are decent, Fulham are good this year, Brighton are solid, Bournemouth we've seen are solid, Southampton and Wolves are a little bit poor, but they've been quite good so far. And I think the way they choose to defend, which is very resolute, it's very don't give up space in behind, I think will give Chelsea some problems. But I think this is going to be a very interesting tactical tie where Forest in their games so far this year, if we look at their possession totals, Forest are very happy to give up the ball. Against teams who want to play with it, they will absolutely give you the ball. They had 36% against Southampton, who love the ball, 32 against Liverpool, 30 against Brighton. Chelsea will have all of the ball in this game. If there was a betting market for possession totals, I would bet Chelsea 70% over right now. That has not been how Chelsea have been successful the last couple games. Like if we look at the same kind of match runs for Chelsea, it's against Wolves, they have 60% of the ball, 62, 66. But West Ham, it's 47. Brighton, it's 41. Like, it has not been all the ball all the time. And I'm very, very curious to see against a stauncher defensive team how them having all the ball goes, because they will have to create. They will not be able to just smash long balls in behind like they did against Brighton. I think this will be a very, very different test going into the international break. And a fun one. We're at a point in the season where like we can learn things, and if things go wrong, it's not the biggest deal. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, I think, and that's fine. So we'll see how that goes. But that's all for me today. I hope everybody enjoyed the match, and we'll see you all Sunday after Nottingham Forest. Take care.